Which brings me to Death Comes to Time.
Yes. Finally, we get to talk about this. We've had this in pre-production for a little while.
Look, we have. So let's start off, Rob. Tell us in a sentence or two, what is this thing that we're about to talk about? Because some of our listeners may not have heard of it.
Indeed. Look, folks, Death Comes to Time was a 5-episode webcast animated adventure that ran online on the BBCi website in 2002. Now, when I say animation, I'm talking very rudimentary animation, like still cartoon drawings and the camera moves a bit on them. or something very basic in the frame moves. It's not a real animation. But it was the BBC's first serious attempt to bring back Doctor Who after the 1996 TV movie. Of course, Big Finish had already been making licensed audio at this point for some years. So this is coming at a very strange time where the franchise has been farmed off, Big Finish is making audio, then the BBC starts having a crack and produces this. It then produces Real Time, which some people might know. If you ever see the Colin Baker Doctor in an all-blue outfit, and they say, oh, that's the Real Time Doctor, that's what they're referring to, an audio called Real Time. They also made a version of Sharda with Paul McGann as the Doctor in Sharda, and they also made Scream of the Shalka with the alternate Ninth Doctor played by Richard E. Grant. So BBC had a real crack in the early 2000s at making these animated audio things, and Death Comes to Time was the first of them.
It was, and it really was in that most wildernessy of wilderness years, that period after the 1996 telly movie. Because I've said many times, the wilderness years really does come in two halves. You get the one where we're still thinking Doctor Who could come back, and we've got the New Adventures and the Missing Adventures and the 30th anniversary and documentaries, and there was always something just around the corner. And then Steven Spielberg's going to make Doctor Who. Oh, his company's making. They're doing a telly movie. Paul McGann's the Doctor. Let's watch the telly movie. Oh, was that it?
Yeah.
And at that point, there was that real sort of sense of, look, we had our chance. The show's not coming back, and everybody slowly kind of drifted away from fandom. And by the time you get into 2001, this is 5 years after the telly movie flopped.
Yeah, and they've farmed audio off to Big Finish. They've given the license to Big Finish. So your perception is, well, it's not coming back to TV on the BBC. So it was even a bit of a surprise that the BBC did their own audio in this case.
Yeah, it really was. So from my perspective, I was vaguely aware that this was happening, but I was myself moving on from Doctor Who fandom. Mm-hmm. At this point, I think I went to the last con I went to for many, many years in 2001, a con up in Sydney. And then I think myself, Richard, and the sort of the people we've been hanging with all moved on from the local club committee. I went off, I'd finished uni at that stage, so I was entering the workforce and kind of was moving on from Doctor Who, looking for other things to excite me, getting into other things.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. That really was where I was, and a lot of people were at that stage. I do remember sort of people saying, oh, have you checked out Death Comes to Time? And the main feedback being that the internet just was so rudimentary back then. Most of us were on dial-up. We were trying to get this thing off a very basic BBC site, and that if you could do the sort of the 4 hours of buffering to get 30 seconds of dialogue, it just wasn't worth the effort. And and most people, I think, just didn't bother. I certainly didn't. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, I was aware of it at the time. I'd been an early adopter on the internet, actually. I got on the internet in 1993, believe it or not, at uni. That was my first year of uni. So I was comfortable with getting it to work. I did have trouble, though, with the sort of the buffering and getting it to load up bits of audio with the animation and such. But I wasn't really clued in enough to really understand what I was seeing anyway. To me, it felt like it was following on from something I'd missed. Who was Antimony? Where had he come from? Is he a comic character? Is he in the comics in Doctor Who Monthly? I had no one around to really tell me. He wasn't in the EDAs that I was reading. And the whole finale of the thing I thought was just bloody stupid. Well, for reasons we'll get to behind the spoiler curtain. So yeah, I was aware of it. I listened to it, and I felt really put off by it at the time. I thought it was this really odd thing, interesting in places, but odd. and then I sort of consigned it to the dustbin of history until we revisited it this year.
Yes, so I guess I'll come back to me and talk about my reaction listening to it now for this podcast. And my comment comes in two parts. As an artifact of Doctor Who, this was fascinating. It's like opening one of the Pharaoh's tombs and finding something preserved from a particular era and just sort of getting a sense of how everything looked and felt and worked in this particular part of the show's history. It's like listening to the adaptation of Curse of the Daleks, the stage play, or something like that, where you sort of go, okay, this is a very particular artifact of the show, and having it to listen to was a really quite interesting experience, and I think a lot of our discussion will centre around that. Judging it as a piece of audio, for the first 3 episodes, my overwhelming comment was, mostly harmless. For the last 2 episodes, I thought this is an utter mess. Now, there's a couple of reasons behind that, one of which I'll mention now because you intimated it as well, Rob, and that's that it was designed to be a pseudo-animation with pictures. So the audio doesn't take that into account. It assumes you're going to watch it graphically. As a result, there isn't any of that sort of, that big Finnish audio play. Oh, look over there, Doctor, it's one of those. Or, look, Doctor, he's doing that now. Or, let's just introduce who this person is by, hello, random named person. There isn't that sort of dialogue going on there, and that is a bit of a lack. And the context to it all, therefore, isn't quite... Well, it's just not there. You're going into it like a jigsaw puzzle without the box. The second point I will reserve, because I'll get your reaction in 2022 first.
Yeah, once more under the breach in 2022. My reaction was much the same as before, although having seen New Who now, you can sort of see bits of New Who that tie into this. Not that it's deliberate, mind you, but the whole lonely god of the RTD era. I mean, cripes, that's exactly what the Doctor is in Death Comes to Time, a lonely god. Of course, it still does all the things that are jarring and not canon as well. And I don't mean not canon in I didn't like that, so it's not canon, or, hey, that was ambiguous, is it actually canon? I think we can comfortably say Death Comes to Time isn't canon, which is bloody fascinating for a story that had all the real actors in it and was trying to push Doctor Who forward in the face of other things that were going on, like Big Finish and the fact that the McGann Doctor was a thing, and yet they went and made this. But I really can't say any more until the spoiler curtain comes down, Dave.
No, I think we can say that at best this exists in some sort of parallel or experimental universe. It does completely erase the telemovie. We can say that, I think.
Easily, yes.
And so the other point that I just wanted to make here is that you need to appreciate when you listen to this that it was designed as a backdoor pilot.
That's right. There was an intent to go on with the series, which is something we'll tease out when we get there.
Yeah, so I felt that was very important in helping me understand what was going on here. If you watch backdoor pilots, something like Assignment Earth from Star Trek, or the Office episode The Farm, where suddenly there's no one in the office other than Dwight, and we're just on a farm with a whole bunch of new, apparently regular characters that have randomly turned up in our show. Like, unless you know they're backdoor pilots, you don't work out what they're going on. They always feel very weird because they're backdoor, and this had that feeling. The final point I want to make before we sort of go into spoilers and talk about the plot is it's written by someone called Colin Meek. Yes. And I thought, I've never heard of this guy. I want to learn more about him. So I started searching. And
there's a reason for that.
And there's a reason, yes, because as I have the quote in front of me, Colin Meek was a pseudonym used by Dan Friedman to write Death Comes to Time. Friedman has stated the reason for using the pseudonym was, quote, probably just cowardice.
Fair.
So it's a very interesting thing we're about to dive into. I'm ready to dive in.
I'm ready to dive into. Let's bring that spoiler curtain down.
Now, Rob, like we did with Lungbarrow, we're going to do a bit of a plot summary back and forth so that those people who've never heard of this before know exactly what we're talking about, and it saves you listening to the audios for 3 hours if that's something you don't want to do.
Yeah, this worked well with Lung Barrow, I think. People who had never read that liked our description of it, so let's try it again.
And if you don't want to listen to the full plot or you want to go in spoiler free, pause us now, go listen to it, and then come back for our thoughts.
We'll see you then.
See you in 3 hours.
Right, I'll kick off. General Tanis destroys the city of Anet. This is the first stage in the Canisian invasion of the Santine Republic.
The Seventh Doctor and his companion Antimony arrive on Santini. The Doctor helps the anti-Canisian resistance. Suddenly, nearby bushes catch fire, but the Doctor isn't worried. It's just someone trying to contact him.
Meanwhile, a being identifying himself as a god of the Fourth appears on a spaceship to rescue a prisoner. That prisoner is Ace. He tells her that he is Casmus and that she was rescued so that she could learn.
The Doctor and Antimony travel to the Temple of the Fourth on the planet Mycen Island, where they see the statues of long-dead Time Lords. They see an inscription. We serve the many until the many are one, until twilight falls and death comes to time.
Yes, a Time Lord called the Minister of Chance arrives with a message for the Doctor. It was he behind the burning bushes on Santini that led them to Mycen Island, and he explains that 2 Time Lords, Antenor and Valentine, have been murdered on Earth.
The Minister travels to Santini to replace the Doctor with regard to helping the resistance there, whilst the Doctor sets out to investigate what has happened to the Saints on Earth.
Yes, this leads the Doctor to a radio telescope where the Saints, Antenor and Valentine, were working, but have been killed by vampires working for General Tanis. Both the vampires are dispatched, and we learn that one has already reported back to Tanis on how rich the Earth is in resources.
While all this is going on, we are privy to a range of lessons Casmus is teaching Ace.
Also, while all of that is going on, we see the Minister of Chance helping the resistance on Santini.
The Doctor makes plans to strike back at Tanis by making trouble on Alpha Canis for him via the Premier, Bedlow, whilst the Minister keeps Tanis busy on Santini.
This backfires, unfortunately, with Bedlow and Tanis making a new deal, and Tanis revealing himself to be a Time Lord. He also reveals that Antimony is an automaton, shooting him in various body parts, concluding with his head, while the Doctor watches on, seemingly unwilling to use the great powers Tanis knows him to possess.
Later, Tanis is talking to a subordinate about the powers the Minister possesses too. He tells the story of dropping a plague bomb on a planet, but no one died. When he investigated the planet further, he found people worshipping the Manister, suggesting the Minister has been using the kinds of powers the Doctor refrains from using.
Yes. Ace is brought to the cave of the Kingmaker, an old woman who watches over the Time Lords. She gives Ace a test to be sent to Anima Persis. She must restore the planet to its rightful inhabitants without abusing new powers at her disposal following Casmus's training. Casmus gives Ace a wand that has the ability to manipulate time, but with a warning not to use the wand.
On Anima Persis, Ace tells the locals she is a Time Lord, and she is there to reclaim their planet. A girl called Megan offers to guide Ace and takes her to a crater. There, Ace imagines the dead spirits who have claimed the planet but want to take her TARDIS and spread universal terror unless Ace gives Megan to them. Ace uses her Time Lord powers to destroy the spirits.
Later, Ace wakes within her TARDIS, despondent that she wiped out the villagers in her attempt to save Megan and destroy the dead spirits, and has misused her Time Lord powers on her very first mission.
Yes. Casmus is visited by Tanis, who has come to kill him. Tanis says he has eliminated the other Time Lords and set the Doctor and the Minister against each other. Casmus reveals Ace has been transformed into a Time Lord, but Tanis laughs at him, and he says he will destroy her too. Casmus says the age of the Time Lords has passed, and expresses pity for Tanis.
The Doctor, meanwhile, goes to Mount Plutarch to plead with the Kingmaker, but she will not interfere with Tanis's actions. He is utterly evil, but has broken no laws of time, only amassing power through the use of conventional force.
The Kingmaker tells the Doctor that Tanis is not responsible for the damage to time. It is in fact the Minister of Chance who is the cause, as we learnt earlier with the example of him saving the planet, which now worships the Manister.
Yes, the Doctor is now charged with the responsibility to destroy his friend, the Minister. The Doctor first goes to Casmus's garden to be reunited with Ace. They mourn Casmus's death, and the Doctor reassures Ace about Anima Persis. There have been no living beings on that planet for centuries, and it was actually an illusion. She has yet to develop full Time Lord powers.
Ace produces Casmus's wand by way of retort, but the Doctor shows her it is just a stick. Anima Persis was a test, one that all Time Lords fail, so that the memory of failure stays with them forever as a stark warning.
Ace then leaves for Earth to prepare for Tanis, whilst the Doctor must now confront the Minister. The Minister shouts at the Doctor to leave him alone, but he has to pay, so the Doctor uses his power to revoke the Minister's TARDIS, leaving him powerless.
At NASA Mission Control, a fleet of spaceships is detected approaching Earth. The US President is informed and receives an ultimatum from Tanis. He must surrender immediately, or a bomb will be dropped on London.
The President receives a telephone call from the British Prime Minister, who informs that countermeasures are being taken. To Tanis's shock, a fleet of shuttles emerge from behind the moon. Tanis then receives a message from Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, and some of his ships are destroyed.
Tanis orders his troops to make a ground assault, and they land near Stonehenge. They move towards London, but are confronted by unit troops. Abandoning his troops to their fate, Tanis seeks out the Doctor. He finds Ace first and starts to beat her to death before the Doctor finds them.
Tanis then baits the Doctor that he dare not use his powers to save Ace, just as he hadn't saved Antimony. With the choice between abusing his powers or leaving Tanis free to abuse his, the Doctor chooses the former, even though it means his own death.
Declaring himself a god of the Fourth, the Doctor unleashes his power, and afterwards he and Tanis are gone.
Yes, Ace finds the Brigadier and tells him the Doctor is gone. She returns to the Kingmaker and, conferred with full Time Lord powers, a new age has begun. Dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun. Well, Dave, it's bloody bonkers, isn't it?
It's amazing. It doesn't feel like an attempt to pick up the show. I guess because it wasn't. It was an attempt to put a full stop on the show and then move on to a whole new production with the characters and the ideas and the universe this has created. But as I said, to start off with, the telemovie's been completely ignored. We're back to the Seventh Doctor and Ace as they were in Survival, basically. Yes. But let's talk about the biggest bonkers thing in this all. The Time Lords are now kind of religious priests with godlike powers who float around the universe testing things and training new Time Lords and what?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at this. I get the sense that the Time Lords and Gallifrey are already on the decline and may not be that populous out there, but kind of separate to the Time Lords is this extra level of Time Lords, these gods of the Fourth. These guys who will go around as men, not gods, as penance for something that had happened long ago, and they'll put things to rights. They won't use their immense powers because that's against the rules. And that's really the crux of the whole story. We see it in Ace's training, don't use your powers. We see it at the end of the story where the Doctor, you're not going to use your powers. Zap, he uses his powers. As an alternate sort of background to the Doctor, fleshing out that he's, I'm more than just another Time Lord, I can sort of go with it. I find it interesting. I find it an interesting reason to be going around the universe trying to fix things. And of course, Ace being trained as a Time Lord was something being planned for season 27 anyway.
Yes.
It obviously wouldn't have played out like this conceptually, but to see Ace become a Time Lord is a really interesting thing in the story, at least.
Yes, I certainly noted that as I was listening to it, because, as our summary demonstrated, that Ace becoming a Time Lord thing is made pretty explicit pretty early on. And I did sort of think, okay, they've latched onto that Cartmel and Romovich idea of where Ace was going to go. That's really interesting. The point with the Doctor, I think, sums up the best and the worst of Death Comes to Time. you're right, this idea of the Doctor having these extra powers, maybe being more than a Time Lord and all of the rest of that, is a really interesting idea, and I'm glad they did it, and it's interesting to explore. The problem is that it's not done in a way that latches onto the old series, in that it's not a case of, as an audience, we start to learn that this is actually a bit more about the Doctor and that this is stuff he's hidden and it's slowly revealed. It's just something that he has now for this story, and we're all kind of meant to have just known that. And if I can perhaps continue on sort of that point into a broader thing, there's again a lot of really cool, interesting ideas happening in this, but lacking the context of the background, lacking the visuals to accompany them, and frankly, due to some quite clumsy writing at times, it just... I spent a lot of time kind of working out what was going on. So, one moment the Doctor's on a planet helping a rebellion. Okay, cool, I'm with that, I'm following that.
Yep. Now
he's somewhere where something's been murdered by a vampire, and the vampire... the vampire... they're on Earth. Okay. And sort of by the time I've kind of got a handle on what that scene is, we're already sort of 2 scenes later.
And there is a confusing thing there. I don't know if this tripped you up as well. It did with me on this re-listen. You think he's working with a policeman, Speedwell, to investigate the vampires, but then Speedwell is reporting back to what is obviously Unit, and in fact appears later in that Unit battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's actually Unit.
Yeah, absolutely. So characters sort of turn up. And again, if you've got the visual in front of you and you go, okay, that's a character dressed like that, that would help. We didn't have that, and the audio doesn't give you that. So, yeah, there was a lot of that contextual stuff that was very, very unusual. And swapping between scenes at a very fast rate of knots. For example, you get scenes of the Admiral and captains and the like bombing various planets. It's not always obvious, and sometimes it's really not obvious which planet they're bombing and like which part of the story this relates to. Are they bombing the planet with the Resistance on it? Are they bombing Earth? Are they bombing the planet where Ace is? And you need to kind of pull that together. That background just isn't there. And as much as I sometimes like to mock the Big Finish really obvious dialogue sometimes that sets things up, when it's not there, I really missed it.
Yeah, look, and one thing I will say before I get to my next point is that over the years, people have taken the images off the animation, married it up to the audio, and put it up on YouTube. So there are several different versions of Death Comes to Time on YouTube that work to varying degrees, where you can actually listen to this and see the images too, if that helps you out there, dear listener.
I would highly recommend it doing that way if you have the ability to. I wish I had.
Yeah. Now, look, I mentioned, the concept of the Gods of the Fourth and how that was kind of interesting, and you could almost call that, the good part of the story, because I did sort of a column of good stuff and bad stuff. When you get to the bad stuff, however, where do you start, Dave? What were they thinking? We've got an 8th Doctor at this point in time. He was on telly back in 96. He has ongoing audio adventures in Big Finish at this point in time. He has a whole range of BBC novels. But in this audio, we're going back to Sylvester. We're going to make Ace his replacement and kill him off. And then it's meant to be the finale to the classic series. And it instantly can't be canon, as we were sort of hinting at earlier, because fandom knows that the Doctor progressed beyond Sylv. They saw Sylv bloody regenerate into Paul on screen. It happened. It's a fact. If they were trying to do this in the early 90s, or at worst at the end of the NAs, if the BBC had no interest in taking things forward, maybe this could have worked properly. But even then, I don't know, when people have watched and adored this character for decades, the Doctor, that they'll suddenly say, oh yes, we'll just put him to one side now and we'll just have a whole new character. I don't see that working. So I do wonder whether, because his body's not found at the end of the piece, whether he wouldn't have come back at some point.
I think that if we take this as being a standalone alternate universe story, the idea of what would cause the death of the Doctor or what would motivate the death of the Doctor is a really interesting thing to explore. And that concept of him giving his life to bring peace to the universe, to bring balance to the Force, to save his companion, sort of all coming together, is a neat idea. And I think that it's one that was really fun to explore. And that probably was the part of the ending that worked better for me compared to some other stuff. So I quite like that. As I say, as this artifact of experimentation, it's interesting. It doesn't work in the big history of the show, and it's not that great. But it is interesting to kind of see, well, let's play with that idea.
Yeah. So I'm just looking down at my notes, and I'm trying not to be negative as I talk about this.
Can I talk about something that's neither negative or positive, but more of an observation?
Okay.
And again, I'm talking about this being a layer of time. You know when you cut down into the layers of the ice and you see all the different eras and all the rest of it. And we're looking at this, and I think what it showed to me is how little influence Doctor Who around the 40th anniversary really was having on pop culture, and all the things that were, because when this wasn't feeling like Doctor Who, it was feeling a lot like Babylon 5, even down to the imagery of the One. There was some Buffy imagery in there. There was some Harry Potter imagery in there. Remember, Harry Potter was first published 4 or 5 years before this, and what was really big, and the whole stuff with the wand, I thought, someone's been reading Harry Potter. But Battlestar Galactica, I think, was just on the horizon at this point. And again, there's a lot of feeling of that sort of thing going on. So this feels like 2001, 2002, which was very Doctor Light.
Yeah, and there's quite a liberal dose of history in there as well, with Tanis bringing his army into the city and having a sort of a triumph. It's very Julius Caesar at that point. It's just ripped from the history books, basically.
Yes, it is, and there's lots of contemporary references that really threw me, because we've been going through this real futuristic stuff with space fleets and godlike powers and planet hopping and vampires and all that sort of stuff, and suddenly we're into like the US presidents calling Tony Blair to like talk about stuff. And it's like, okay, have we completely changed genres? And just as I'm going, okay, well, we're going hardcore contemporary Earth, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart is leading a fleet of spaceships into battle.
Yes, and announces himself.
Yes. And
I think he just says, I'm the Brigadier.
Yes, something like that.
As if there's only one.
Yeah, which...
like, I am the Brigadier.
Which again, and I hope I'm not labouring a point here, but that idea of rooting things into the now, the moment, was very big at that stage. I mean, we're into Independence Day stuff, where alien invasion is seen through the prism of the President of the United States. It again, it feels like that era of television and movies.
Yeah. Now look, while you've been talking, I did pick out something that I think could be a positive to talk about. And that's Stephen Fry as the Minister of Chance.
Well, let's just talk about the whole casting, because the casting is spectacular. Stephen Fry being one of many, but start with Stephen Fry, yes.
Stephen Fry, through all of this, acts so doctorish. He's almost filling the Doctor's role. Well, he is, technically, because the Doctor was helping the Resistance out on Santini, and then the Stephen Fry character, the Minister of Chance, goes there to take over. So he is literally doing the Doctor's role. But even the way he acts is very similar. And I thought, this is actually very clever, because if he is a god of the Fourth and the Doctor's a god of the Fourth, this is just how all gods of the Fourth act. They get around as mortal men fixing things. So they all act essentially the same. So when we say the Minister is acting like the Doctor, well, the Doctor's also acting like the Minister, because they all act like each other when they're these gods of the Fourth. And I thought, oh, that's kind of good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, again, allow this sort of experimentation, in that what Stephen Fry is basically doing is, it's not quite what if the Doctor was the Doctor but a bastard. It's what if the Doctor was the Doctor but his morality was just a bit differently skewed.
Yeah, and not even radically so, because I don't think the Minister thinks he's a bad dude at all.
No. As I say, he's just played as somebody who has just a different tweak, a different spin on morality, and how the Doctor would look if that's what happened. It's a really interesting performance, and Stephen Fry is clearly having a lot of fun doing it, and I think has decided he is the Doctor for this one.
Yeah, essentially. It's very strange how everyone's all split up at the start, like Ace is off on this spaceship where she gets picked up by Casmus. We don't know why she's on that spaceship, I don't think. The Seventh Doctor is with Antimony. Again, I thought, is this a character from the Dwim comics? Who is this? It was just made up for this story. This automaton that the Doctor has made his ideal companion, and it's this, sort of strange automaton who doesn't actually know it's an automaton.
No, and is apparently entirely dispensable.
Indeed. He gets shot in the head and the Doctor doesn't do anything.
Yeah, that was a bizarre scene, because you're sort of suddenly having this revelation that this companion that we're sort of going, okay, I guess he's the companion, right, okay, let me factor that in. Oh, he's now an android. Okay, well, that's interesting. And, the android's not aware that he's an android. Okay, we're doing that. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Okay, yeah, but... Oh, no, they've killed him.
Yeah.
It's like part 3, and no, he's been shot. Okay, I guess I wasn't meant to care about him then.
Yeah, very disposable.
Speaking of disposable, as I said, really big name cast in some ways. Jacqueline Pearce gets...
I knew you were going to say that.
One scene?
Not many.
It's only 1 or 2 scenes. Anthony Stewart Head, who doesn't sound a lot like Anthony Stewart Head.
No.
But again, this is peak, Anthony Stewart Head Imperial phase period.
Yeah.
He doesn't get a lot to do either.
No, that's right. It's really John Sessions as General Tanis who gets to do most of the acting. Casmus has a fairly big role, Leonard Fenton.
John Sessions, I honestly thought was Julian Glover for a long time.
Really?
Yeah. I double-checked a couple of times to see that Julian Glover wasn't in this.
He's having a lot of fun.
Yes.
He is absolutely chewing the scenery. If you like that kind of thing, tune in for John Sessions in this. But also John Coleshaw is in it. And of course he's a man of many voices. He plays 3 different characters, some of them quite minor.
And none of them overtly John Coleshaw characters either.
No, he's not doing like Tom Baker impressions or anything like that.
No. It was actually a very, very, very good job he did, because I didn't recognise him at all.
Exactly. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, Nicholas Courtney. So you see all these names in it. Oh, and Antimony, we should mention, was Kevin Eldon, who's a well-known comic over in the UK. It's quite a cast to pull together for something as weird and odd and going nowhere as Death Comes to Time is. Yeah,
I mean, the Brigadier, I think, is brought in to legitimise the death of the Doctor, which is an interesting thing to do, but really doesn't feel like the character that we know at all. Ace is probably one of the highlights of this, though. I think Sophie Aldred moves into the character again very well. She feels like a slightly older Ace. One of the advantages of this being 2001 is that both Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred still sound like we remember them sounding like.
Oh, yeah.
So it is really lovely just to hear those younger voices again and see them slip into the characters. And I liked the Ace plot. I liked the way that it was teaching her morality through experience and through tests. And that evolving of the Ace character was really interesting. But because this is Death Comes to Time, it was at the same time wacky and bizarre, because suddenly Ace is just a Time Lord now, because she is.
Yeah. And I agree with the training. In theory, the stuff she was being shown was quite cool, although some of it was a bit like stuff you'd read in a fortune cookie that Casmus was saying to her.
Yeah.
A bit mystical, a bit fortune cookie, and then she'd learn something. But yeah, it makes me wonder how they would have shown her becoming a Time Lord on the show, though. Possibly not in this much detail. Possibly, we're shipping her off, and next thing we see her in the robes and she's a Time Lord. I don't know.
I think they would have done something of this nature. There would have been the trials or the test or something with a twist. But yeah, it was the part that I was most engrossed with. I think perhaps in part because of Sophie Aldred, but also in part because that was a very linear piece, and Casmus is always explaining to Ace what's happening next and what's going on, or what just happened. So it was actually much easier to follow. It was a nice, well-explained linear plot in between the Doctor just jumping around planets and times and locations and different fleets, all very kind of non-linear.
So look, all told, Dave, this feels very... Although I know it's from the early 2000s, it does feel like 90s sci-fi, sometimes devoid of a Doctor Who influence, and it is deeply weird. Is that the best way to leave our listeners on this?
It is very late 90s, 2000 sci-fi.
Yes.
As I said, it's got a lot of those influences. And if you're someone of that era, I think you'll get a lot out of picking those influences and just seeing where these things have come from. I come back to what I said. It's not a very well written or constructed script,
No.
but it is a fascinating one to dive into and just appreciate how unconnected from the saga Doctor Who was at this point. And it was an era where really you could just do anything because no one cared.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
It really is.
I've got a funny story to end on, Dave. Late last year or early this year, I decided to do Death Comes to Time, and I even wrote this cryptic tweet at the time. I've just thought of a podcast topic that I haven't seen tackled very often. And I threw it out there, and some of our keener listeners were intrigued. But I didn't say what it was, and we sort of talked about it in the background, and then we moved into pre-production a month or so back. But friend of the show, Dylan Rees, and I were chatting, and he said, we're going to do Death Comes to Time as our next topic on my show, which is the Too Hot for TV podcast. So if, folks, your appetite has been whet by us taking you through the story and talking about the story here, if you look up Too Hot for TV, actually their latest episode is a Death Comes to Time review. So, one of these things doesn't come along for years and then two come at once. It's like a bus. Dylan's a great friend of the show. In fact, Dave, later this year when you're on holidays, he'll take over co-hosting with me for a month. So,
Fantastic. We'll look forward to being a listener for that one.
And as Dirk gently says, everything's connected. His co-host on that Death Comes to Time episode is Ian Martin, who is a co-host on the All of Time and Space podcast that we were recently on. So everything in this Doctor Who podcast world is connected.
Fantastic.